Good morning. So what is this series exactly? Well, after my dozen or so times of playing through the Pirate101 story, I realized I haven't really ever read the dialogue. Sure, I know major plot points, but I was never enriched by all the dialogue and story this game has to offer. So that is what we're doing today, and for the next few months. I started a new privateer with the explicit purpose to read all the dialogue of the main story and truly learn why it is what we do. Sit back, relax, as we head into the story of Pirate101, experiencing the nuances you may have overlooked, and endure potential side rants about the relevance to today's world. If you like this format, please consider subscribing, commenting, and liking to show me you're enthralled by the Pirate101 story like I've been. Without further ado, let's sit by the fire and get started. Good morning, and welcome to the first double-digit episode of the I Started Privateer to Read All the Dialogue in Pirate101 series. We are on Haunted Skyway, so we're dealing with the end of Cool Ranch, Captain Blood, Fort McMurtry, Sabatini, and all of that. So let us get right into it. So we head to Fort McMurtry and speak with the Colonel Church, and before we even get to talk about Sabatini and what we're there for, the Colonel tells us that we need to help him with his war against the ghost ships. So we go defeat like 6 of them, we come back to him, and he says that Sabatini ran out of town a week ago and says that he'll find out and tell us why, and in the meantime, we gotta go help some of his lieutenants with some problems that are going around the fort. So we speak to Lieutenant Masterson, who I believe is like a brother of Bat Masterson from the Magnificent Seven. And he wants us to ask some civilians and troops if there's been anyone suspicious nearby from a recent jailbreak that happened. And we learn of two. There are 2 people that are acting a little suspicious after the jailbreak. The first is Weasley Jenkins, who is hidden nearby in an old mine shaft. Pretty simple, pretty easy. We just take him, bring him back. And the second is a little more difficult. It is Crazy Horn, who is a bison that escaped and is now hiding in a vortex at the other end of the Skyway. So we go find him, beat him, and then bring him back, and all's good. And then we return to Masterson. And also, interestingly, Jim Masterson, the lieutenant, actually joins us if you're a privateer. So we can see him right there. Pretty cool. He doesn't really get anything. Unfortunately, he just gets Witch Hunter repos. He doesn't even get like a Jobu's Breath, kind of like Bat Masterson does. But moving on. We return to the Colonel Church, who tells us that he has learned a few things about Sabatini. He tells us that Sabatini is rumored to be holed up in the old abandoned church. We enter the church and see a scene of Captain Blood threatening Sabatini's life. Sabatini, in his final moments, calls out to us to look to the cards to find the sisters on the Islas de los Muertos. And then he is promptly taken by Blood, and then we are ambushed by Blood's troops. Now that is obviously our best lead, so we go to speak with Madame Esmeralda on Isla de los Muertos, who does a tarot card reading for us. And when you're there, you can actually see Wizard 101 cards on the table, which is pretty fun. So our cards are Judgment Reversed, which refer to mutiny and distrust being the cause of our plight, with the Drowned Mariner, Captain Blood at its head, and holds the key that we seek. So to take it, we need death. Not death as in kill him, but death as in the actual person, death. And he will show us the way to beat Captain Blood. Now Scratch tells us that the ravens act as Death's servant, kind of like Odin's birds. And if we feed them, they will show us the way. So we head to Santo Pollo, get some corn, return to feed the ravens on Isla de los Muertos, and they reveal Black Bart. Madame Nadia tells us that Black Bart is a vile killer who offends death, so we must gather lost spirits of Bart in Haunted Skyway and take them to the graveyard, and death will find us. We collect some of the lost souls in Haunted Skyway and head to the graveyard at the abandoned church. Black Bart finds us there and attacks us. We beat him, and then we speak with Death. Death explains to us the situation with the cards, and there is a funny little puppet show that we can watch about Death. So let's hear the story of Captain Blood by Death.
I don't know why Captain Blood wants to live forever. His life was never that great in the first place. All that violence and pillaging hardly seems worth the trouble. But he is, rather obsessed with immortality. And so, on his deathbed, he challenged me to a friendly game of cards. Yes, I know, I have a gambling problem. I'm getting help, all right? Look, I don't have to answer to you. It really is none of your business. Anyway, there we were playing cards. In the final hand, Blood raised the stakes and bet me his immortal soul. I had him. That's when he cheated. I played my cards, but Blood went to the bathroom and never came back. And he took his cards with him. So here we are, stuck in limbo. I can't collect Blood's soul because I haven't won the game. But I can't win the game because the game can't end. Blood's hand remains unplayed. He hasn't lost yet, you see. Very clever. It was a dreadful loophole, and of course I've had the rules changed, but I'm afraid it doesn't apply retroactively. Captain Blood is stuck between life and death, and I can't touch him. He cannot be killed, or even harmed, really, until our game is over. Captain Blood's cards must be played by his own hand on the table where my cards are still waiting.
So that's the current situation, and we're kind of at a stopping point here. Death tells us what needs to happen, but we don't have any sort of direction on where to get the cards, where to get the hand, where to do anything like that. So Ratbeard suggests that we speak with Sly Winkham back in Tumbleweed. Now, Sly actually tells us he was there at the card battle between Death and Captain Blood, and he suggests that we find Blood's separated hand that El Toro cut off. So we speak to El Toro, who tells us that his father fought him over Gold Creek. And actually, El Toro joins us. This is where El Toro joins us for the remainder of the game. He becomes a main story companion. And we go to retrieve Blood's hand from the bottom of the creek and return to Sly. And Sly tells us that the cards were scattered all over the town of Miranda, where the card game was held. Now, Miranda is the major dungeon of Cool Ranch Part 2, so we start by helping a ghost from these skeletal deputies, and then we head to the saloon and speak to the dealer, who we see in the puppet show, who directs us to where some of the cards are held. The first is held by a ghost in the general store who wants us to collect his prayer pages. The second is held by one of the mutineers who wants us to bury his fellow mutineers for the card. The third is held by Bosun Bud, who is a loyalist to Blood, so we have to fight him for the card. The fourth is held by the last living person in the town of Miranda, who just wants to escape, and then he gives us his card. And then the last card is dug up under from a nearby house. We use Blood's hand that we found from under the creek, as well as the cards that we got during our trip in Miranda, and play the cards and officialize Blood's loss. And then Blood teleports in and says that someone still has to kill him in order to finalize his death. So we brawl, we fight, and of course we come out on top. Death takes him, and we speak to the ghost of Sabatini, who tells us that we can now head to the Motherlode Mine, which is the place of all of Blood's riches. And Scratch suggests that we destroy some ghost ships on the way to rid the Skyway of evil. So we enter the mine, and the first thing we notice is a Mushu ship, identified to be the Santo Oro, which is Marco Polo's ship that he used to find El Dorado. But we see that the way is blocked off, so we need to get some dynamite and a mine track to clear the way. We blow up the path, and we are on our way down to the Santo Oro. Once we get to the bottom of the cave, we are ambushed by Deacon and the Armada. And with Deacon and the Armada defeated, we can retrieve the loot, which consists of a bottle for the ship itself, the gold, and a second piece of the map. And the last thing is a photo with all of the El Dorado crew. We take it to Argleston back in Cooper's Roost to see if he can identify anyone that's in the photo, but he can't, so we take it to Captain Avery in Skull Island. Avery solves Marco Polo's mystery and figures out that there are 7 pieces of the map and then also 7 people in the photo, so 1 piece per person. Avery says he'll talk to Catbeard, who was another person in the photo, and also the pirate that we saw in Port Regal, and he tells us to go to Mushu and find Egg Fu Young, who was also in the photo. And Avery tells us to find Zhu Ro, a tea house owner who may be able to help us find Egg Fu Young. And that is the end of Cool Ranch. That is the end of Book 10, and that is the start of Mushu, which is a beautiful, beautiful looking world in Pirate 101. Wizard 101 fans are in tears at how beautiful the Pirate 101 Mushu is. And this is also where a big difficulty spike in the game happens. The opponents in Mushu are a lot harder than they are in Cool Ranch Part 2. So if you're playing along, then you might have to, you know, think about your strategy, think about your companions, how you move them, how you use them. But for now, that is the end, and I will see you guys in Mushu in Book 11.